Hello, everyone, and welcome in. Welcome in. I am Coach Sherry, and this is Real Talk with Coach Sherry. It is my podcast here on YouTube, and I'm happy that you're here with me this evening, afternoon, or nighttime, whatever time it is when you are catching this. If you are catching me live, please let me know that you are in the building by saying hello in the chat. If you're watching this on replay, let me know that you were here. I really would appreciate that. I was on the fence on whether I was going to go live today. I knew I needed to because I did upload quite a few shorts this weekend and I wanted to just connect with you all. And it was interesting, talking to young people. I have three young adults, 26, 24, and 22. And I was having a really good conversation this evening with my 22-year-old about relationships, about the state of this country, and just a lot of things, just to hear, her perspective. And my husband and I, we have really great conversations with our young adults about life in general. We've always had real talk conversations with them since they were young in age. And I am going to do another video about relationships later on, about some tips that I've shared with my children and just their perspective now that they are young adults and dating. But I wanted to do this podcast on the power of optimism, practical tips for a brighter outlook. Now, all three of my children are phenomenal, but my youngest in particular is one of the nicest people that I know. And I've said that since she was a little girl. I've identified all of the superpowers that each of my children has, and for her it's her kind spirit. And you know she's a very optimistic young lady, and not everyone is as optimistic as she is. Some people will say, oh, that's not the way to look at it. You need to think about that again, or be more critical in your perspective about that particular situation. And when I reflected on her just sharing with me some ideas of how she chooses to review things, or the lens that she chooses to look through life with, it made me recall how I was even at her age. And really, I want to say probably until my mid to late 40s. And I was very much like that, especially when I was in my 20s and 30s. And people used to always say to me, Sherry, you live in a fairy tale world. That doesn't happen in real life. But in fact, the things that I felt, that I thought, that I focused on really did happen in my real life. And so I realized then that if you are optimistic about life and about the things that you're going through, and truly believe that all things are possible, especially if you come to it, you know that he's going to get you through it. It will happen. But if you start to think about the things that may happen, the challenges that you may encounter, the barriers. They always say 98% of what you worry about never happens. And a lot of people focus so much on what they don't want to happen. But if you're optimistic and you only focus on the things that you want to happen, the outcome, even if the outcome isn't exactly what you expected, as long as you can glean a nugget, a lesson from it, then you have won, then it has been a success. And if you can go through life with that, you will have so much less stress. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart. I hope you have your pen and paper ready for this podcast so that you can take down some notes. I'm going to share with you some of the tips for a brighter outlook. And I know that we are in a time when maybe some of us don't think that the outlook for the future is as bright, but it can be. And we can only control what we can control. And as long as we can control that and know that it is going to be bright, then guess what? It's going to be bright. Just like I say, when people have favorite teams and maybe their team isn't doing so well during the season and they become this fair weather fan, oh, they're jumping ship and not really cheering on their favorite team anymore. I always say any given Sunday. So no matter how dim, how gray, how dark a moment may feel like, seem like, look like, there is any given Sunday when things can change, when what you didn't think was going to happen can change, the tides can change, and we all can be victorious. So, hope you have your pen and paper so that we can jump right in about the topic, which is the power of optimism, practical tips for a brighter outlook. All right, so optimism comes from taking constructive action and focusing on what you can positively influence rather than dwelling on factors outside of your control. And again, that's that 98% of the what could have, may have, could be, should be, won't be, don't want to be. All of those things are outside of the control, especially when you're talking about things that haven't even occurred. Even if it has occurred before, it could always change. So these are just some tips for maintaining optimism after outcomes you may not have expected. In life, it could be your relationship, personal, professional relationship. It can be the state of the country, the state of the world, and there may be these outcomes. It could be, a sporting event. You have a favorite team that's in the finals, and the outcome may not have been what you expected. So these are some tips on how to maintain being optimistic even in those times. So the first one is you need to focus on what you can control. So take positive actions in your community and personal life. Engage in activities that bring you comfort and relaxation. And those can include things like exercise, reading, spending time in nature, or connecting with loved ones. Take a walk outside and get out of Brick City or the pavement, go to a park, find a walking trail. I did a short on one of the greenways that we have here in Charlotte. I don't know if where you're from, and put down the state that you live in or the country that you live in, and let me know, do you have greenways where you live? And that's where they take areas and they carve out really beautiful walking trails, which are typically within nature. And Charlotte has done a phenomenal job creating greenways throughout the city, the suburbs, the outskirts. And they are in these like hidden areas that you would never really expect them to be. But when you find them, they are definitely hidden treasures. So if your community where you are from has those, look for them. And when you get a moment, just take a walk through them. It doesn't have to be a brisk walk. You don't have to run. If you want to run, you can. If you have a bike, you can do that. If you want to rollerblade, whatever the case, but get more connected with nature and check in with your loved ones. If you have elders in your family, give them a call and see how they're doing. Young ones, pass on that wisdom that you have right now. Talk to your young nieces, nephews, young cousins, and see how they're doing. Check in with them. You'll be surprised at how excited they will be to hear from you. Okay, number two, you want to limit consumption of things that can amplify negative emotions. So you want to set boundaries of what you see, read, and speak. So if you're at a point where maybe the news is a trigger right now, certain conversations, remove yourself from them. You do have the power to turn off that channel or change the channel to excuse yourself from that conversation. I know the other day I was talking to my 86-year-old father, and oh wait, he was just going in. And I said, you know what, Dad, I'm really not in a good place right now to have this discussion. It's very low energy, and I just don't feel up to speaking about this. Let's change the subject to something else. And I promise you, it was almost as if my phone was on mute because my father he almost went in even more. And I was like, yo, I said, you know what, Dad? I think we're going to have to end this conversation and I'll talk to you later. And he was like, what? But you called me. I said, yeah, I did, but I definitely didn't call to have this conversation. So we'll talk a little bit later. And those were my boundaries. Listen, I'm 55 years old. I know he's 86. I highly respect him as my elder, as my father. But at the same time, I have to protect my energy too. So it's going to be important to set boundaries on what you see, read, and speak and hear. All right. The third is practice self care. Engage in activities that reduce stress and promote well being, like exercise, meditation, or spending time in nature. Again, that nature piece is real. I know it's kind of cold now. We're just getting fall weather that's going to happen this week. I mean, we are in the second week of November, and here in the Carolinas, it's just getting into the 60s. But if you are still in a warm climate, try and walk barefoot on grass. They always say tree huggers are the most connected to nature. Hug a tree if you can. Do something where you're touching and feeling nature as well. And meditate, get into that quiet place and become more thoughtful and practice that, mindfulness as well. The next number four is connect with others, reach out to supportive friends and family, have positive social connections because those can boost your resilience. So, if you're part of organizations and maybe you haven't really participated as much in the past because you always had one excuse or another, but now is that time to reconnect. If you have an alumni association, a sorority, a fraternity, a church organization that you belong to, and you may not have attended those meetings, go to those social groups and meet with them, participate in any outreach that they may be doing. It's so interesting. I belong to quite a few, not quite a few, but enough associations, personal associations, but I seem to find the time. I'm on three boards of directors for different organizations, and I always make those meetings once a month. But for my social ones, not so much. And I'm definitely going to be more intentional in attending my social groups meetings as well and being more active to have more awareness and just being with more kindred spirits, because even though I really get along with the people that are on the boards with me, we aren't fully connected. We're just connected to that one cause, that board that we're on. But when you have a social group, you have so many additional types of connections with the members that are in it. I'm going to pause here at number four and see who's in the chat. Is Black Guns and Gardens. Hello, good evening to you. Thank you for tuning in. And I really appreciate your video that you did today. I can't recall the name of it. Let me see if I can pull it up on my other device to see what the name of it was. But it was so timely, and it was on time for me because of the experience that I just had last week in Florida. So I want to thank you for putting that together. Yeah, it was about this situational awareness, enhancing your personal safety. And if you're watching this on replay, anyone, I highly recommend that you check out Black Guns and Gardens and see that video. It's really necessary. I did share it with my three young adults as well as my husband because I think it's something that we need to all be aware of. So thank you for that video. All right. Let me go back to number five. You want to acknowledge your emotions. Allow yourself to process the feelings that you may have about something that you need to be more optimistic about. Give yourself grace. I know one of my daughters was talking to me about a friendship that she has, and she was talking it through and she started to cry about it, and it really surprised me. But I told her it's important to recognize that you do have this emotion. And maybe it's also important to set boundaries with that friendship if it is so, so deep to you and have you feeling that way. Because, having those conversations is important. That's the one thing in relationships that a lot of people miss. It are that the importance of communication. But acknowledge your emotions and have that self-talk with you, and know what you are actually feeling. There are so many more emotions than just sad, happy, glad, mad. Really dig deep and feel what it is that you're feeling and why. Whatever is going on, it may be a trigger for you, but what is that trigger? What is the root cause of that emotion? Number six is you want to look for signs of hope. Seek out stories of people working for positive change and progress, even in small ways, you know. And again, that might be volunteering. We're coming upon Thanksgiving, and unfortunately, especially with the price of food and such, and with people being so transient, they may not be able to get back to their families. You know, you may want to help feed the homeless, or feed the sick and shut in, feed the people that don't have access to food. You know, maybe put together food baskets with different Thanksgiving essentials in it, and dropping it off to different places as donations. Donate food to a place that's putting together baskets, you know. Do anything small or large that you can. And again, people being so transient, you may have neighbors that will be breaking bread alone because they don't have family in the area. They couldn't get to their family, or vice versa. And, you know, inviting them over to break bread with you. I remember well, it was actually Christmas, my first Christmas, and we were in California, my husband and I, and we invited one of his teammates over for dinner. It was with the Los Angeles Rams at the time, and I can't cook. I can't cook. I listen. If they say the way to a man's heart is his stomach, I'd be single. And this is 29 years later, but I can't cook. And I tried to fry chicken. At the time, I didn't realize that you needed flour, nor did I realize you needed to put like a lot of grease in the pan. And so all I know is when we all sat down at dinner, it was terrible. I mean, I had the presentation down packed, you know, in terms of the table setting and things like that. But the food, it just looked wrong. And at the time, we lived in a condo, and I just remember my husband and his teammate, all of us just looked around. No one touched the food. Like, we just sat at the table and the food was in the middle, and we all was just like looking at it. I think they was trying to figure out what it was, and I was just hoping that nothing bled out. Let's just put it that way. And at some point, I remember, I think it was either myself or my husband mentioned how uh, some neighbors that lived downstairs from us had invited us over, but you know, we declined since I knew I was cooking, quote unquote. And I was like, I think my husband or I, say if it was me, and I said, you think the neighbors still have enough food for us? And my husband immediately was like, "You let's check, let's see." And we went down there, and we was like, "Hi, you know, we know you invited us for dinner. Is it possible? Do you still have room maybe for even an extra one? We have a third person." And they invited us, and it was like, sure. It was an older retired couple, very nice couple, and they invited us in. I believe I brought the store bought desserts that I had, and then I remember, as a thank you, I had gotten a beautiful arrangement made for them and delivered. But you know, look for ways to seek out. You know, doing things with other people, especially now during the holidays. Don't just dwell where you're at. Number seven is you want to cultivate hope and resilience. Look for signs of progress and positive change, even in small ways. Remember that setbacks can be opportunities for growth and recommitment to your values. You know, determine again, what are your values? And even though everyone around you may not have the same values, stick to your values. You know, cultivate that hope and that resilience, and be true to yourself. Don't accommodate or adapt to how others may be around you. Be true to yourself and the best you that you can be. Number eight is educate yourself on issues and new things that may be coming up. Educating yourself is very empowering and will also increase your sense of control and awareness. You know, knowledge is power, KIP. I know there's a school here in Charlotte. It's like a charter school of sorts, and it's called KIP. Knowledge is power. I know our first financial group that we belonged to back in the early 2000s was called KIP. Knowledge is power. You know, learning about different forms of investments and things like that. So educate yourself on issues, your local issues, your regional issues, of course, national issues. And the more that you know, the more control that you will have. And the more that you know of what will impact you and how you can better protect yourself and your family. Number nine is practice gratitude. Focus on what you're thankful for. That can help counterbalance negative emotions. So if you feel that you're starting to feel riled up, like I was when I was talking with my dad, counterbalance that with more positive um, emotions like gratitude. What are you grateful for? I'm grateful that I have my father still that I can speak with. I'm grateful that I'm still here, that he has a daughter that he can speak with. So focus on the good of whatever the situation is and not so much of the negative. And finally, number 10, you want to practice grounding techniques. And this is by using methods like deep breathing, mindfulness, journaling, trying to just stay present and reduce anxiety about the future or about that situation. When you practice that deep breathing, make sure it's in a quiet place. You can have some soft music playing. It shouldn't be anything too blaring. Write things down. Be have more mindfulness when you are writing. Manifest the things that you do want to happen versus the things that you think are going to happen. And today being November 11th is the best time. I can't figure it all out, but 11/11 means something major. But I understand it to be the best time to refocus on your intentions and writing them out plain and clear. I highly recommended it to my family. I did it for myself. I wrote out my prayers for my husband and my children for this intentionality for 11/11. Well, that's all I have in terms of the power of optimism, practical tips for a brighter outlook. But just remember that optimism is not about ignoring a reality or pretending everything is perfect. And that's the thing. When you have positive outlooks about things, sometimes that's what people think. Like when they used to tell me, "Oh, Sherry, you living in a fairy world or fairy tale." It's not that I think everything is perfect. Even in the fairy tale, everything is not perfect, but it's an approach to life that focuses on possibilities, focusing on solutions and positive outcomes while still acknowledging those challenges. You're not saying that what's happening is not happening, but you choose to focus on the positive, on the lessons learned, on how it can make you better and those around you better. I hope you got a nugget or two from this podcast regarding the practical tips for a brighter outlook. The power of optimism is very strong. And as we know, the opposite is being a pessimist. And that gets you nowhere, but it gives you anxiety. It makes you, have lower energy. It can affect your and impact your health. So in these times in particular, we have to remain optimistic. If you have a moment, just write in the chat or in the comment section of this podcast, what nugget are you taking away? And I'll just run through the ones real quick. So the first is to focus on what you can control. The second is limit consumption of things that can amplify negative emotions. The third is practice self care. The fourth is connect with others. The fifth is acknowledge your emotions. The sixth is look for signs of hope. The seventh is cultivate hope and resilience. The eighth is educate yourself on issues and new things. The ninth is practice gratitude. And the 10th is practice grounding techniques. So, again, I hope that you got a nugget from that and are going to implement one or all of these things. And some of them may be aha moments, aha things like, oh, yeah, aha, that's right. I remember that. And, things that you forgot. But these are things that are tried and true and that will help you get through these moments where we have to look at the brighter side of things, have a brighter outlook. Well, that's all that I have for you today. It's been my pleasure sharing this information with you. And again, I hope that you're able to implement it right away. Remember, practice every day. Listen, practice like your life depends on it. And in real life, for whatever you're doing, be it your work, your relationship, your life, when you practice, eventually you'll be developing new habits that will be part of who you are. And so when you get into that situation where you have to do and show up doing what you have been practicing, you will always win. It'll be easier and you'll find yourself having more success with greater frequency. All right, everyone, you have a wonderful evening. I am Coach Sherry.